really strong, almost embarrassingly strong Fourth Wing vibes. The tags are kind of all over the place for this one. I just feel like, how could it possibly be bad? I will always read a book about dragons. And that is honestly everything that I could ever ask for in a book. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm talking about the most anticipated releases for me for the year 2025. So before we start, just to let you know, over here, I will have an image of the book cover, and then I will also put briefly on the screen a description of the book based on what it says on Goodreads. It's just gonna be brief. So if you want to hear about that book, if you wanna read the description for it, then pause and read the description for it, and then you can continue on with the video. Or after I'm talking about it, then you can go back and read the description afterwards if you want. It'll be there waiting for you. So without further ado, let's start off with book number 1, the first book coming out next year. January 2nd, 2025 is the expected date, and that is A Language of Dragons by S.F. Williamson. This is advertised, you can see on the description right here that I'm flashing on the screen, as an exciting debut novel and a dark academia fantasy, perfect for fans of Babel and Fourth Wing and the Scholomance trilogy. I'll be honest, I don't know what the Scholomance trilogy is. I've never heard of it, but I have heard of Babel. From what I've read, I've really enjoyed it, but unfortunately I took too long and it was returned back to my library and I've never finished it. It's definitely on my list of things that I have to finish ASAP. Fourth Wing, I'm not the biggest fan of, but I do think it was really fun and really exciting, and it was definitely a vibe. This book, to me, based on the description, gives me really strong, almost embarrassingly strong Fourth Wing vibes. The protagonist's name is literally Vivian Featherswallow, which to me is almost a one-to-one copy for Violet Sorrengail from Fourth Wing. Like, even the last name, Featherswallow Sorrengail, like they both give me bird vibes or like flying vibes. And they're both V names. Like, I just feel like this author could not have actually tried harder to get a closer match other than just flat out naming her person also Violet. I feel like the MMC, like the love interest, the male protagonist, is probably going to be named something like Xander Ranson or something instead of Xaden Ryerson, like in Fourth Wing. But I feel like it's going to be also so close, like embarrassingly close. And I don't like that. Also, just based on the description where it says she wants to follow the rules and she just wants to go to school, she wants to study dragon languages, etc. But then all of a sudden she gets swept up in this whirlwind and yada yada yada. That to me really just sounds like Fourth Wing. Like, to me, this just sounds like a copy of Fourth Wing, except with dragon languages instead of dragon writing. I'm not really sure. I read the reviews for it, and some people say that really it's not that much like Fourth Wing and it's okay. And if you didn't like Fourth Wing, you'd probably still like this book. So I'm definitely going to give it a try, but I don't know. It's kind of rubbing me a little bit the wrong way, the similarities, because I feel like it had to be done on purpose. Like, there's no way that the author just came up with the name Vivian Featherswallow and did not do that on purpose to copy Violet Sorrengail. So we'll see. That one I'm kind of a little bit worried about just because of that whole thing, but I'm still excited to read it. Next up is A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrienne. You have probably heard of that, honestly. I feel like this is one of the more popular anticipated releases of mine, personally. Some of the other ones are a little bit less known, but this one, I feel like I've heard quite a bit about it. Maybe it's just my circle. I've heard good things about it so far, which is exciting. It is a mystery kind of thriller. I do like Adrienne in general. She is the one who wrote Sky in the Deep, which is a book about Vikings that I really enjoy. And she also wrote Fable, which is a book about pirates, kind of. As far as a pirate book goes, it really was not that piratey. However, it was still a really good book in general. I liked it less as the series went on, but I did really like the first one, and I do really like Sky in the Deep, her Viking book. And so I have pretty high expectations for this. I think I'm probably almost certainly going to enjoy it at least a little bit, if not genuinely like it. I have a good feeling about it. And this book is expected to be published on January 7th, 2025. Next up is a book called Immortal by Lynn Tan. And this is a standalone romantasy, which is kind of my thing. I definitely like a good series. However, I'm definitely leaning a little bit more towards standalone books lately because I just feel like I have been overwhelmed and inundated with so many series that I'm just having trouble finishing. And so a standalone romantasy is kind of perfect, actually. Romantasy is one of my favorite genres, if not my absolute favorite genre. And this one sounds pretty good. It says that it's also mythology. The description is not super long. However, I'm a big fan of anything that is either directly a mythological retelling or just inspired by mythology. I feel like those books tend to be usually, not always, but usually really good. So fingers crossed. This book is expected to also come out on January 7th, which is kind of funny. I wonder, like, why is that date so special? Because not only was the last one January 7th, but also the next one says January 7th as well. Book number 3, as I mentioned, expected publishing date January 7th, 2025, and that is Breath of the Dragon by Shannon Lee and Fonda Lee, and it's from a series called Breathmarked. It's book number 1, so it's the beginning of the series. And it's a young adult fantasy duology, which is nice because, as I mentioned, I have issues with finishing series, and if I can't read a standalone, then I'd rather just read a duology, just 2 books and then be done with it and not have like a 20 book long kind of saga that I have to finish. A duology is perfect. It's tagged on Goodreads as Asian literature, dragons, high fantasy, young adult fantasy, fiction, martial arts. Sounds really interesting to me. And I also feel like based on the description, this has the potential to be like top 10 books of 2025 for me. I don't know, that's kind of a bold expectation and estimation, but I just feel like it sounds really good and it kind of sounds really up my vibe. I really like action-packed fantasy books that are not so serious and dark, not necessarily lighthearted, but just have like a little bit of romance or fantasy, as in like more wholesome fantasy instead of just super dark. This is giving me like very slight Poppy War vibes. And I really liked the Poppy War, but it was just like a little bit too dark and a little bit too serious and deep and like not lighthearted or romantic or anything at all. It was just very, very, very intense and dark. And to me, this feels like it has that tiny little bit of the Poppy War, but like the young adult version with like a little sprinkling of romance and more martial arts, which sounds fun. I have high expectations for this one. I don't know. Fingers crossed, knock on wood. By the way, you might notice that I am kind of inching over with every book that I'm telling because the sun is right here in my face and it's going down actually really quickly. It's 2 p.m., 2:30 p.m., and the sun is already starting to set, which sucks. I hate winter so much. So I thought that I would have more time, but I was wrong. And so I'm kind of having to like run away from the sun with every book. I'm so sorry. So book number 4, to continue with this really weird theme of what is happening on January 7th that is causing so many books to be published on January 7th, because this book is also expected to be published on January 7th, 2025. And it is The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis. This one I'm also like really, really excited about. I debated when I was in university, deciding to go to university, what I wanted to study. And I went back and forth on if I should study ancient history, specifically like the ancient Near East, the ancient Orient, or if I should study languages. I just like was stuck between those two things. And I decided to go with languages because it's just more my passion. It's just more me. I could see me using it more in my day-to-day life. However, I still have such an incredible passion for history, especially ancient history. And I feel like Egypt is just like a gold mine for such interesting, rich culture and history and everything. And it's so fascinating. And so I just eat up any book that has anything to do with Egypt, especially ancient Egypt or Egyptian mythology, like anything like that. It just sounds very interesting and kind of exactly my vibe. I do tend to read more like fantasy or romantasy books, and this is not that. This is more of a historical fiction, mystery, like maybe a little bit of a thriller. And that's not necessarily my vibe, but if it is because something went missing in a museum or whatever, something was stolen, there's like a curse and the curse comes to life, or Egyptian mythology or whatever, then like it's absolutely up my alley, and that is what this book is. So I am super pumped to read it. This is also another one that I feel like has the potential to be very high on my ratings list once I'm finished reading all of my books in 2025. I feel like it also could potentially be top 10, maybe top 25. I probably next year am going to read the same amount of books I read this year, which was over 100. So top 25 is top 25%. Fingers crossed it gets up there. I don't know, we'll see. Next up is book number 6, and this is First Love Language by Stefany Valentine. And this is expected to be published 1 week after the other ones, January 14th, 2025. This is a romantic dramedy, a young adult contemporary. It's also tagged as Asian literature, contemporary romance fiction, coming of age, etc. And those are also not really my genres. This one I'm a little bit more uncertain about than the others on this list. However, it sounds intriguing and it sounds like it's gonna be good. It says for fans of Frankly in Love and Tokyo Ever After, which I don't know what those are. I don't know if those are novels. I'm assuming they're novels, but like honestly, they could be TV shows, they could be manga, they could be anything. I have no idea. I've never heard of them. I just like the idea of the story where she has her father's copy of the 5 love languages and his notes, and then she uses that to kind of help coach somebody else, but she's pretending. And she's Taiwanese American, and so her culture is a big part of it. And I really love books that have a very strong culture aspect like this. I think it's fascinating and usually really wholesome at the end, especially like if it's a happy ending, which I'm assuming this is gonna be because it's a young adult romance. I cannot imagine if it was not a happy ending. So we'll see, but I think it could be potentially really cute, which is kind of what I'm hoping for. Next up, number 7 is Our Infinite Fates by Laura Steven. I feel like every single one of these books, at the very top for the tagline for the book, they're just comparing it to other books, which I get why you would do that if it's a brand new book and nobody knows about it and you're trying to attract, not customers, but readers. And so I get why you would do it, but it's so annoying though to always be comparing books to other books and saying that like, this is half this or half that or whatever. I would just like to read about the book on my own and then draw my own conclusions based off of it sometimes, but it's okay. It says the invisible life of Addie LaRue meets This Is How You Lose the Time War in this fantastical love story that defies death as 2 souls reincarnate through the centuries. So right off the bat, I'm gonna say I don't like sci-fi, but I did like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I did like This Is How You Lose the Time War. And so I'm hoping that this is not like super sci-fi like the beginning of This Is How You Lose the Time War. And I'm hoping that it's just a little bit more romantic and a little bit less futuristic, because I think that's mostly what I don't like about sci-fi, that like futuristic technology-based kind of aspect of it. So I'm hoping it's not going to be like that. I love the idea, like more than anything, of lovers being reincarnated over centuries, or like people who were lovers in a past life and then they realize in their present life like that they have this connection, or soulmates, soulbound lovers. I just love that trope so much. I just read a series like that, Bespelled and Bewitched, which is basically that trope with a twist of it being witches, or a witch and a sorceress, or a mage, or whatever the heck. And I love that so much. Like I ate it up. Like it's just, I love that trope. It is so romantic and so sweet and so passionate. And it has such the possibility to be so special. And And it also has the possibility to be really badly done or cliche or cheesy. And I'm really hoping that this book is not going to be that. I really hope that it's going to be a really romantic, passionate retelling. I feel like this book has a really unique twist on that trope though, because it's not necessarily that they both so passionately love each other they would die for each other. It's that one of them literally is trying to kill the other one. And so I feel like based on that, it has the potential to be one of the best books within this trope. And I'm really, really, really excited to read it. I really hope that it's going to be good. And the tagline, they've loved each other in 1,000 lifetimes. They've killed each other in every one. I really cannot wait to read it. Next up, number 8 is A Harvest of Hearts by Andrea Eames. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. This one is expected to come out March 4th, 2025. And it says, in the beloved tradition of Howl's Moving Castle, which is my favorite book ever. I just love it so much. It's one of my favorite movies ever. I'm just so obsessed with the story of it. And so if this is like that, then I think probably I'm really gonna love it. It says it's an unforgettable story of fantastic adventure, common sense, and the power of love to overcome the greatest of obstacles. And it's fantasy, romance, romantasy, LGBT, magic, young adult fiction, etc. So I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this one. I think this might be one though where I want to wait for more people to review it before I decide if I want to read it or not. With some of the other ones, especially the last one, Our Infinite Fates, I don't care what anyone else says, I have to give it a try. I have to read it and just figure out for myself if I like it or not. But for this one, A Harvest of Hearts, it's a little bit more that I really want to read it, but I want to see what other people say first. Next up, number 9 is The Scorpion and the Night Blossom by Amélie Zhao. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. And this is it's book number 1 of the 3 Realms duology. So another one where it's short, it is a series, but at least it's just a duology, just 2 books and that's it. And this is supposed to be published March 4th, 2025. This one is another one where it's got a mythological aspect to it. The tags are fantasy, romance, young adult, romantasy, mythology, high fantasy, Asian literature, adventure. And all of those tags intrigue me. So this is another one where hopefully it's gonna be good. It says that it's perfect for fans of Throne of Glass, which I am a fan of. However, I think that there's a lot of issues in Throne of Glass, and I think sometimes it's very, very, very cheesy and cliched. But overall, I do really like Throne of Glass. And so I'm hoping that this book does something similar, but maybe hopefully a little bit less cheesy, a little bit less cliched. I don't know. We'll see. I've never heard of this author before. It says that New York Times bestselling author of Song of Silver and Flame Like Night, but I have honestly never heard of either of those books. I don't know anything about this author. I don't know how they are, but fingers crossed that it's going to be a good one. Lucky number 10 is one that probably you know about. I feel like everyone nowadays knows about, and that is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. It's the Hunger Games book 0.5, and it's expected to come out next year, March 18th. And I mean, I don't really feel like I have to explain this one to you too much or read the tags. I've read the first 3 Hunger Games books. I have not read A Song of Songbirds and Snakes or whatever. I don't even know what it's called right now. I'm sorry. I've not read that one yet. I've also not seen the movie yet, but I would like to. And I definitely, absolutely want to read this one. Like, more than anything, I genuinely cannot wait to read about Haymitch. I think I'm probably really gonna like this one based on how I liked the other books. I think this is gonna be like at least a 4-star book for me. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Next up, number 11 is Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciccarelli. And this is the Crimson Moth book number 2. And I've actually not read book number 1, so maybe this should not be on my list. However, I do really want to read book number 1. And based on the reviews, based on people that I know I tend to read similar books to and like similar books to, and how much they liked book number 1, I have a feeling I'm probably really gonna like book number 1. Then I'm gonna wanna read book number 2. And so I'm excited for this to come out, even though I've not read the first one yet. And this comes out February 18th, 2025. So I actually also am going to try to hold back on reading the first one until February, until this book is definitely for sure out, maybe even out for a month or two, because that's usually how long it takes to arrive at my library. And then I think I'll give the first one a go so that I can just read the second one immediately after reading the first one. Hopefully the second one is going to get as good reviews as the first one, but honestly, I feel like so many people I know have read the first one and loved it, so I'm pretty confident in it. Next up, number 12 is The Prince Without Sorrow by Maitri Wijesakara. I'm so sorry. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that name incorrectly. I apologize. And this is also another author that this is their debut novel, which is really exciting. It is part of a series. I'm not sure. It's trilogy. So 3 books then. It's called The Obsidian Throne, and it's book number 1. Of course, it's her debut novel. And I'm pretty excited for this. It says perfect for fans of the Hurricane Wars and the Jasmine Throne, which honestly, I've not read either of those. So I have no idea. I've got nothing to go on. However, it says it draws on inspiration from the Mauryan Empire of ancient India, which I think is really exciting. I really, really, really like it when books are drawn off of actual cultures and really, really, really rich cultures. I just feel like it makes for such a good book normally, and I'm super excited to read this. It's tagged as fantasy, adult, witches, queer, romance, LGBT, romantasy, fiction, high fantasy, etc. So I don't know, we'll see. I really don't know what to expect with that one. Could go either way. Next up, number 13. Lucky number 13 for me. That's my favorite number. This is The Labyrinth, book number 1. I believe that this is, I feel like I read somewhere it was a trilogy, but maybe I've got that confused with something else because I can't see anything here. But it's Labyrinth, book number 1. It's called Exquisite Ruin, and it's by Adrienne May. But then there's also another author listed, which is A.M. Strickland, which I am confused by. Perhaps A.M. Strickland is the pen name for Adrienne May because Adrienne May is A.M., so it would make sense. I'm not really sure. But this is expected to be published March 25th in 2025. And it's fantasy, romantasy, fantasy romance, mythology, witches, demons, retelling, dark fantasy, which again, a lot of tags that I really like. I'm not the biggest fan of books about witches. However, I will absolutely make exceptions in many cases, and this is absolutely one of them. It's a reimagining of the Minotaur myth. And it's a sorceress and a demon entwined in a sensual battle. I don't like that description because it makes me feel like this is going to be really smutty, which I really don't like. I'm not a big fan of smut at all. So I hope it's not going to be that sensual of a battle. But it's a sensual battle to escape a deadly maze and reclaim their freedom. I really like the idea of the Minotaur myth. I really like books with labyrinths in general. I feel like books with puzzles in general are very fun, especially if it's a labyrinth and somebody has to get out of it. I don't know what it is. It's such a small, specific thing like a labyrinth, but my gosh, I just really like it. And so I have very high expectations for this book, but also I'm afraid I'm not going to like it at all because it might be a little bit too smutty based on the description saying that it's a sensual battle. Number 14 is Gifted and Talented by Olivia Blake. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce her name. However, she is the author of The Atlas 6, which I've actually not read yet, but it's been on my TBR for forever and I would love to read it, and I've heard so many good things about it. And this one sounds very, very, very fascinating. It's 3 siblings, upon the death of their father, forced to reckon with their long-festering rivalries, dangerous abilities, and the crushing weight of their unrealized adolescent potential. And it's tagged as fantasy, adult, contemporary, science fiction, magic, urban fantasy, magical realism, paranormal, etc. And based on the description that you already saw, I already put on the screen, I just feel like it sounds interesting, and it honestly sounds right up my alley. I don't like sci-fi in general or really urban fantasy. However, based on the description, I feel like it might be the type of sci-fi and urban fantasy that I prefer more because it doesn't feel so strong like sci-fi or urban fantasy. To me, this just feels a little bit more like a magical realism kind of book instead of like a proper sci-fi, technology, space wars, time travel kind of book. To me, it feels a little bit more just a general fantasy. I don't know though, we will see, but I'm very excited for that book. Coming out on April Fool's Day, which I feel like, is this a joke? Like, does this book actually exist? Is it really gonna come out? Or like, is this just some whole April Fool's gotcha kind of prank? Because that will crush me. And then next up, number 15 is The Twisted Throne, which is the Bridge Kingdom book number 5 by Danielle L. Jensen. And this is about Anna, who's the sister of the main male protagonist and love interest in books 1 and 2. And I'm super excited about this. I will put the description on the screen in a second, but I would not recommend necessarily reading this description if you really want to read the series and you've not yet, because you might spoil something for yourself. Read at your own risk. And this is just a fantasy, romance, romantasy, fiction, adult, etc. I mean, if you know anything about the Bridge Kingdom, then you probably already know about this book. And if you don't, it's book number 5. So this is kind of a very specific one just for people who have read the series or intend to read it. I really like it. I would highly recommend it if you like romantasy at all. I think it was a very good one. I'm not the biggest fan of Danielle L. Jensen, but I do think she does a good job. Always. Sometimes a great job. Sometimes a barely good job. But I am very, very, very excited for that book. Finally, I have been waiting for it for forever. And it is finally coming out this coming year. Next up is The Floating World by Axio. And this is a fantasy, young adult, mythology, again, retellings, again, romance, Asian literature, again. I feel like I have a theme. I'm seeing the mythology tag, the retellings tag, the Asian literature tag, and also fantasy and romance and romantasy tags all the time. The romantasy and fantasy tags don't surprise me because literally almost everything I read has that tag. It's just my favorite genre by far. But I didn't think that there were that many mythology or retellings or Asian literature books in my anticipated releases of next year, but I guess they are. It's like honestly half at least. But I am super excited. It says Final Fantasy meets Shadow and Bone in this romantic fantasy reimagining the Korean legend of celestial maidens. This sounds so good. Like, this is also absolutely one of my most anticipated and probably top reads of 2025. I just feel like, how could it possibly be bad? It just sounds so good. And it's from the New York Times bestselling author of The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, which I have not read yet, but I want to read it so bad. And I think I'm definitely going to have to add it to my TBR soon because I want to read it before this comes out. This comes out, by the way, expected on the 29th of April in 2025, and you can bet your bottom dollar I'm gonna be right there. I'm gonna be like texting my library 24/7, like, when's this coming out? When is this coming out? Please add it to the library. I want to read it now. I am so excited for this one. Next up is another book by Danielle L. Jensen, A Curse Carved in Bone, and it is the Saga of the Unfated, book number 2. Book number 1 is A Fate Inked in Blood, and then this one, A Curse Carved in Bone. It's expected to come out May 13th, 2025, and it is about a shield maiden, so it's a Viking-inspired story, which I really like. I love Vikings. I don't necessarily think Danielle L. Jensen did a very traditional, accurate job of depicting Vikings, but I also don't think it was that bad. And it was just enjoyable to me. I enjoyed the first one quite a bit, especially the audiobook. Oh my gosh. I listened to the audiobook and it was the best decision I ever made in terms of reading this book because the narrator for it has a Scandinavian accent and it just feels so darn immersive and so much fun, and I just enjoyed it so much. So hopefully for this book, they'll also have the same narrator for the audiobook because I will literally wait another year. I'll wait until May 13th, 2026 if I can just listen to the audiobook with that narrator again because it was so good. And this one is also tagged as mythology, also fiction, new adult, romantasy, fantasy, romance, etc. So fingers crossed that they have the same narrator as the first audiobook, that it's as good as the first book, if not even better, ideally even better. Hopefully a little bit less smut. I just really don't like the way Danielle L. Jensen writes smut. I'm not a big fan of smut in general, but especially how she writes it, it's just very, it's not my vibe. Anyways, the next one is Cruel is the Light by Sophie Clark. And this is expected to be published May 20th, 2025. And it says it's a new epic fantasy about a demon hunter and a foot soldier thrown together in a centuries-old war and the forbidden love that could change the course of history. And it's tagged as fantasy, young adult romantasy, young adult fantasy, demons, magic, queer fiction. This one interests me, but I also feel like this one has perhaps the most potential, or at least one of the most potentials on this entire list for being really, really cheesy and cliched and a little bit too young adult. However, I think I'm gonna like it. I'm very, very intrigued by the description. So I am tentatively excited, but maybe a little bit more worried about this one than the other ones on this list, but hopefully it's gonna be good. The tagline on the cover says, "Epic was their love, endless was their power." And I do really like books where the people are kind of like overpowered in a way, especially when they're fighting against each other and then they end up falling in love. I do tend to like those books, so I'm tentatively excited. Next up is A Fate Forged in Fire by Hazel McBride. This is the first book from the series Bonded to Beasts #1. I have no idea how many books are in the series. I hope it's not that many because I don't really want to get started on a series that is incomplete, especially if it's like 4 or 5 books. That's too much for me. I really hope, fingers crossed, that it's just a duology. This book is expected to come out May 27th, 2025, and the tagline for it is "Born to Rule, Blessed by Fire, Broken by Desire." It's a little cheesy, which makes me a little worried. However, the tags for it on Goodreads are fantasy, romantasy, dragons, fiction, adult, also young adult, and science fiction fantasy. The tags are kind of all over the place for this one. I'm not really sure if it's a young adult book or if it's an adult book. It also is tagged as new adult. Who knows? But I do think it sounds fun, and I will always read a book about dragons. Hands down, every single time. I'm never going to say no. Probably. Maybe there's a book out there that I would say no to, but honestly, at this point in time in my life, I've never said no to a dragon book. And then next up, second to last, we have A Forgery of Fate by Elizabeth Lynn. And this is expected to be published June 3rd, 2025. And the reason it's on my TBR and the reason why I think I'm really, really, really gonna like it, I hope, fingers crossed, knock on wood, is it says a breathtaking romantic fantasy inspired by Beauty and the Beast about a girl who paints the future and a cursed dragon lord bound by love and deception and a plot to bring down the gods. And it's from the New York Times bestselling author of 6 Crimson Cranes, which I have not read yet, but I have wanted to read for so long, and I have heard nothing but incredible things about it. Like, not even just good things about it, but actually incredible things about it. And I want to read it so, so, so bad. And I want to read this even more now, actually. Like, I love Beauty and the Beast retellings. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because that was one of the first Disney movies that I really loved when I was a kid. I just really connected to Belle. She was reading all the time and she was like dancing around the library and everything. And I was like, I love her. I love Belle. And I just felt so connected to that movie when I was a kid. And so I'm not sure if that is why now as an adult I love Beauty and the Beast retelling so much, or if it's just the idea of looking past what you consider flaws in a person to like find their heart underneath and then really connect with their heart. And then like they're magically transformed. I don't know what it is. I just love it. I think it's so sweet and wholesome, but also really dark and passionate and everything. Like, I just love Beauty and the Beast retellings. So I'm really excited for this one, especially when it's not just Beauty and the Beast, but you're throwing in then also a cursed dragon lord, a girl who paints the future. They're bound by love and deception. There's a plot to bring down the gods. Sounds so interesting. And again, as most of the books on this list, I don't know why, it's tagged as mythology, retellings, romantasy, dragons, fantasy, young adult, etc. So I feel like I have a theme and the theme is mythology and retellings in general, but this one really seems like it's a combination of mythology with the retelling of Beauty and the Beast, with dragons, with a romantasy aspect, and that is honestly everything that I could ever ask for in a book. And so I think that this is the #1 book that I am excited for. This one, and then also some other ones on this list. Honestly, I'm so excited for all of them, but really though, this one, I'm so excited. And then finally, the last one, there's not even a cover out for it yet. It's expected to come out September 2nd, 2025. It's by Bridget Kemmerer. Again, so sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name, but she is a New York Times bestselling author of A Curse So Dark and Lonely, Defy the Night, and Letters to the Lost, which honestly, I have not heard of any of those books at this point in time. I've not heard of her as an author yet. And the description for this book is just the tiniest little thing. I will even just read it. You can read along with me. This trilogy follows 3 characters: a princess with a secret, the handsome warrior king with fire magic that she must marry for a political alliance, and the assassin who has been tasked with killing them both. The assassin, however, is the princess's first love, and it is tagged as fantasy, young adult, high fantasy, romantasy, fiction, new adult fantasy, etc. I'm not sure what to expect about this book, purely because I don't really know anything about this book, but you can bet your bottom dollar that I'm almost always going to read a book about assassins, especially if it's a fantasy setting. Really, mostly if it's a fantasy setting. I don't really know if I would like go out of my way to read a book about an assassin in like 2024. But if it's in a fantastical setting, and especially if it's a romantasy and it's involving an assassin, you can bet your bottom dollar that I am going to read that the second that it is presented to me. The second it's available at my library, the second I have the chance to read it, I'm gonna read it. I'm not the biggest fan of royalty. I'm not the biggest fan of like court life or whatever. I don't really know why. It just doesn't do it for me. So I'm a little hesitant because I don't know how much court life is gonna be in this book versus how much of like, I don't know, plotted murder, like the assassin trying to kill them and like thrill and all of that. Like, I don't know what the percentage is gonna be. I would prefer if it's at least 50-50. But if it's something more like 80% royalty, 80% court life, etc., and only 20% murder plot and dark kind of fantasy, romantasy, etc., I don't know if I would like it, but I'm still gonna give it a try. I just don't really know what to expect with this book yet. So yeah, that is everything. Hi, quick interjection. That was absolutely not everything. I have no idea what I was thinking. I cannot believe that I forgot this book, Soulgazer by Maggie Rapier. I have been so excited for this book since somebody commented on my video, I don't even know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago now, and told me that their friend had written this book and that it was about pirates because I was looking for more books about pirates, and I immediately looked at the tiny little description that was available at that time and I added it to my TBR. And it is even better now. The description is fully fleshed out right now. There are more tags added. I'm even more excited for it. This one is coming out on the 8th of July, 2025, as you can see. I think the cover is so beautiful. I really, really like that artwork and the style of drawing people that way. I think it's so beautiful and it looks like, I don't know, an oil painting. It's just so beautiful. And the description makes me so happy. And the fact that the tag about pirates is towards the front makes me feel like it's actually really genuinely going to be a lot about pirates, because I feel like I've been so disappointed lately with the pirate books that I was reading because they just were barely about pirates at all. And this book feels like it's really genuinely gonna be piratey and it's gonna be good, and I am just super excited. This is absolutely one of my top ones. Like, I would say definitely one of the top 3 that I'm most excited for, along with the other ones that I mentioned that I was super, super excited for. I'm so sorry that I forgot this book. And I'm so sorry in general that I am so late in publishing this video. You guys have like probably already moved on from all of the 2025 bookish news. But just in case anybody gets any extra books out of this, then I'm happy, because I feel very passionately about some of these books, especially Soulgazer here. so excited to read it. So that is officially the end of this video. I will get back to the previously shown video now. Sorry for the interjection. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I hope you read this book by Maggie Rapier, and I hope that it's good so that she continues writing good pirate books. We need more people like her. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. If you did, this is so much longer than I thought that it was going to be. I thought that this was just going to be like a really quick telling of my 21 most anticipated books of next year, and it ended up being me talking about how excited I was to read them and rambling a little bit and yada yada yada, and I'm sorry. But I hope that you found some good books to add to your TBR. If you have read the arcs for any of these somehow magically, please let me know how they were. Or if you've read other books from these authors, please let me know how those books were also, because I really, really would love to hear from you and kind of just manage my expectations a little bit more. I feel like the worst thing ever is when you're so unbelievably excited for a book and then you go into it and it just really falls short. Or simultaneously, if I put a book off because I don't think I'm gonna like it that much, and then I read it and I think, what was I thinking? Why did I not read it before? This book is incredible. It's like life-changing. And I put it off for so long because I didn't think I would like it. And so I feel like managing expectations is always helpful. And if you can help me with that at all, I would be forever grateful. But even if not, I would still love to hear from you in the comments below always. And I hope that you have an amazing reading week. I will see you in my next video then. Bye.